Hello, and today we'll be playing the newest update of A Fall from Grace. Cedric shivered as the cold water wrapped itself around his fingers. He had taken off his gloves and his hat, laying them on the damp ground to his left. It was now sitting on the side of the stream closest to the bandits' camp. He undid his ponytail and slowly ran his left hand, which he hadn't dipped in the water yet, through his hair. To his relief, it didn't feel greasy, but he knew that if he didn't wash it before going to bed, he would strongly regret it the following morning. Part of him wished he could just take his boots, pantaloons, and the rest of his clothes off and dive into the running water. But the summer days were over. Bathing in the stream was no longer an option during the colder months of the year, and yet the coyote still felt drawn to this or any watercourse whenever he needed to clear his mind or just relax after a long day. It was an aspect of who he was that had remained unvaried since he was a child. At his parents' estate, he'd spend the entire afternoon sitting next to the lake and listening to the water, or bathing and playing games with Victor whenever the fox wasn't busy. During his days as a guest at Lysander's aunt's house, he missed that garden and during his days as a guest at Lysander's aunt's house, he missed that garden and that lake in particular. He would sometimes take walks around his hometown, always making sure to stroll along the riverbank just outside the walls to make up for it. He had always loved the feeling of being immersed in nature, and there had certainly been no lack of that feeling ever since he started living with Victor and the bandits. Getting lost in his own thoughts felt easier than usual on a morning like this, with the much anticipated masked ball looming just over a day away. He recalled just how different his life had been on the same day the previous year. The same Victor who was now a part of his everyday life was then just a warm, hazy childhood memory, part of a world he wished he could return to, especially during the rainy days he spent alone in his room while Alexander was out visiting his many family members. Morning. Victor had appeared seemingly out of nowhere and was standing just a few inches to Cedric's right. "Oh, hi, V. Where did you come from?" "Just further down that way. I was taking a short walk and spotted you sitting here. Is everything all right? I know what that look on your face usually means." "I'm fine, thanks." Cedric smiled. The fact he could tell the fox cared so much about him filled him with gratitude. Thank goodness they never got tired of spending time with each other. Thank goodness he made the right choice. That worrying thought was still lost in the depths of his mind since the start of their relationship, the fear that perhaps once time had passed and they'd both gotten to know each other again, there just wouldn't be much left to talk about, and things would quietly die down between them. Luckily, their bond was as strong as ever, despite their different backgrounds and despite the years spent apart, and at this point, it seemed the topics of conversation were destined to never run out. "I've been thinking, what if things don't go as planned?" "Tomorrow?" "No, not necessarily. I mean, our plan. Moving to the larger towns and starting things over. What if that doesn't come to pass?" Cedric looked the other way, aware he was letting his intrusive thoughts take over at the wrong time. The fox smiled and sat down next to him. "It's hard not to run the risk of overthinking on days like this, isn't it?" "Yeah, I've always been the boy who'd get lost in his thoughts ever since I can remember." "The answer is we have to remain bandits for another year or so. I know it's not what either of us would want in the long run, but you don't seem to mind this life too much, do you? Cedric shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips as he was reminded of the surprising joy he'd gotten out of this lifestyle change. Well, listen to me, love. I'll do everything I can to make sure our plan works out. I promise, when I say I'd like to start things over with you, I mean it. I never wanted you to be locked into banditry for life. It's true, this country doesn't like it when folks manage to crawl out of the place they've been assigned in society. It's almost unthinkable for such a thing to happen. But fuck it, we'll do it, at the expense of those who put us down in the first place. It was not impossible for Cedric not to smile at the fox's optimism. He admired his choice to stand up and change things for the better in a world marred by hatred and injustice. A rogue, a hellraiser, and a revolutionary. You're everything my parents taught me to be afraid of. And they were right to be afraid. Look at us now, confirmed sodomites living a life of crime. These words were accompanied by the fox leaning forward and running a hand down Cedric's chest, aiming for his quads. The coyote shook his head with a pathetic attempt at getting him hard. A pathetic attempt was worked instantly. Now, darling, don't get too excited. I can't possibly delay you so when Hollis is expecting you back at the camp. Oh, does he need help with something? The fox let out an amused snort. You literally agreed to help him prepare lunch for hours earlier. Oh, yes, I did. You really are the boy who still gets lost in his thoughts. Victor shook his head playfully and rose to his feet as Cedric got ready to follow him, picking his gloves and hat off. Luckily, I have a handsome fox bandit to keep me on track. You're just saying that. Just a few minutes later, Cedric was busy helping Hollis carry all the pots, pans, and food they needed out from the tiger's carrots so that the two could begin their work. The coyote took care of chopping up some onions, carrots, and turnips on the biggest chopping board he could find, whilst Hollis prepared part of the salted meat from the group's supplies. We make a good team, Cedric. Have I told you that? Only every single time I help with the cooking. Well, it's true. Well, after we open a tavern at some point, I'd be honored to have you as an assistant in the kitchen. Cedric smiled, not quite sure of how to respond to the offer. I found I enjoy cooking, but I don't know if I enjoy it that much. I fucking hate chopping up onions, for instance. He grumbled and wiped his right eye with his sleeve. You have no idea what I had to put up with back in the day. People who just wouldn't listen to what I tell them to do. Or the few that would listen, but far too incompetently. I told one fellow to season a meal with paprika. He put it on everything, from the roast chicken to the side salad to even the bread roll, for fuck's sake. I simply cannot deal with uncooperative behavior. Preparing food for others is a team effort, and good communication is essential on both sides. Oh, so you had assistants with you in the kitchen? How silly of me. I always just assumed you did everything yourself. You flatter me, said, but I've only got two hands, which you put to great use, that's for sure. Hollis picked up a knife, playfully pointing it in the coyote's direction. You're lucky you're attractive. I'm done with the vegetables, by the way. Brilliant. Next thing you can do is pick up that pot over there, the one I filled with water. Let it heat up over the fire, and then chuck the carrots and turnips in once it starts boiling. Cedric did as he was told, then inched closer to Hollis and checked if he needed any further assistance. I never asked, but how come you left the inn you used to work at? You've always struck me as someone who's incredibly passionate about what they do. You're in the mood for a story, I see. The coyote answered with a slight grin. Half an hour or two to spare is all. And you're a great narrator. You could describe paint drying, and I still listen. The tiger waved his white hand dismissively, indicating the subject was no big deal. The Black Horse, that was its name. 'Twas a family business, as you know, but that all changed after my parents died. My brother and I grew distant until one night he moved out, leaving a note behind and nothing else. That's when I knew I had no choice but to fend for myself. At first it felt liberating. In a way, I could hire who I wanted, manage my time off, give myself a larger share of our earnings. And I didn't have to spend most of my time hiding my sexuality. In just over a year, I managed to turn the Black Horse into a meeting point for the local queer folk, and I couldn't have been happier. Though in hindsight, I might have been a tad too reckless back then. Oh, really? When I say I've seen and done it all, I'm not joking. It felt good compensating for the years I spent hiding who I was. But fate had other plans for me. Most of the people I hired turned out to be a big disappointment. You've gotten to know me well enough, said. I don't think I'm someone who's hard to work with, and I always treat everyone with respect no matter who they are. Will you agree? Cedric nodded. Of course he agreed. It felt like he'd never met anyone as accepting as Hollis and the other bandits in his life. I lost my temper a lot more than I should have back then, until one day they all walked out on me, save one. I wonder how Oliver is doing these days. He was a good lad and stuck with me until the very end. I don't know who was responsible for it, my ex-staff, a disgruntled client, or someone maliciously hiding their sexuality by pointing the finger at others. But rumors began to circulate about the Black Horse, rumors that reached the local authorities. The guards never attempted a full-on raid of the place, but folks gradually felt less safe, and soon I didn't have enough money coming in to keep the business open. I had tears in my eyes the day I shut that creaky old door for the last time and said my goodbyes to Ollie. I had nowhere to go. My reputation in town had plummeted. The people I once worked with wanted nothing to do with me, and my brother wouldn't take me in again, and Satan himself forced him to. And this is where Dion comes into the story. He had long been a patron of the Black Horse. Actually, despite not being close with him, I was well aware of what a larger-than-life character he was, and of the long list of boys that would always be running after him. So I turned to banditry, and after a couple of unsuccessful muggings, I was desperate. One evening I happened across Dion and attempted to pickpocket him. Fucking hell, I wish I could have been around to witness that. Hollis let out a hearty laugh. You would have witnessed me being shoved against the wall, and I was choked at first. Thought it didn't take him more than a few seconds to recognize me. We made peace, had a long and earnest chat about everything, and as a result he offered me a place at his side in exchange for some good food. It almost felt like the planets had aligned, that I was destined to meet him. I'm so glad you did. Despite wanting the risk of coming off as a little condescending, Cedric placed a hand on Hollis' shoulder. He wanted him to know how much he appreciated learning about the events that had led him to his current life. I didn't wish for you to relive any memories you tried leaving behind. Deep down, he almost felt a little jealous at how the tiger had discovered and accepted his sexuality so easily compared to him. He shook his head. That fear of missing out was particularly stupid in this case, considering everything Hollis had gone through. It doesn't hurt as much when I tell this story nowadays. It feels a lot more distant in a way. It's had its ups and downs, but I've led a good life so far. The tiger smiled, tilting his head to look at the pot Cedric had left on the fire earlier. Water's boiling. After having enjoyed a hearty meal and sending praise to Hollis and Cedric's cooking, the bandits had all regrouped in front of the old carriage. It was time for Cedric to stay true to his promise he made and instruct everyone on how to be on their best behavior the following evening. Beginning to set, and the sound of Hillsford's bells could be heard ringing out in the distance, carried by the whistling wind. The sound reminded him of the bell at the old schoolhouse near his home. He'd always wanted to try going to school there, rather than being isolated from other kids his age, Victor being the exception. Hollis handed him a mug of cider, which he knew the coyote never refused. "Have this as encouragement," said. "You don't want a dry mouth while giving a talk." With a look of gratitude, Cedric humbly accepted the drink. "Gentlemen, your attention, please." The sudden clang of a ladle hitting one of the bartender's pots brought an ongoing conversation to a halt. Cedric cleared his throat. Victor, who was seated to his right, gave him a light nudge with his left elbow as a form of playful encouragement. Where was he even supposed to begin? If he'd been put in this situation a year ago, panic would have taken over, but he wasn't going to let that happen now. He recalled how old Farley would start his lessons, trying to encourage some form of interaction from his young pupil. "All right, boys." By soft hands, which of you have been to a masquerade ball before? This method seemed to work. Dion, Whitley, and Selwyn lifted up their hands. "Great. My guess is that it was a public event as opposed to a private one." The three bandits nodded. "I don't know why you expect past me to have enough money for that. Though Sal here might have been able to." "You overestimate the amount of people I used to know. I never got invited to anything." Considering how easy it was to sneak my way into one of these so-called private events, they might as well have been public. Trying to hold the reins of this conversation was proving to be harder work than Cedric had expected. Now these events are what one might refer to as a figurative leveler of society. "That sounds contagious." An amped remark, my dear. Anyone could be hiding under a disguise, from a prince to a plowman. A public masquerade ball is where the rigid rules of polite society go to die, where every person is at last completely equal. Cedric paused. Not to get too political, but that's a truly unnerving thought for the ruling class. Speaking of, do you remember hearing talk of protests against these events a couple years ago? Dion crossed his arms, tilting his head and rolling his eyes. Aye, it was the latest moral panic conservatives had come up with at the time. What an absolute farce. Masquerade balls were accused of encouraging all sorts of degeneracy, immorality, effeminacy, sexual transgression, sodomy, adultery, and prostitution. The others were all laughing by the time Cedric reached the end of the list. Sounds like my idea of a good time. Are they really that intense? You had no idea, Vic. I used to be an innocent young lad before masquerade balls turned me into a whore. Hollis cleared his throat, bringing everyone's attention back to the subject at hand. So what you're saying is we don't need to learn about stuffy rules after all? You oaks wish it were that simple. We are dealing with a public event, yes, but one that's hosted by a rich family in an opulent manor house. Despite being guaranteed anonymity, it would be best for us to still be mindful of etiquette. Thus, if someone greets you, be sure to return their words with a bow. To demonstrate what he was talking about, the coyote performed an elegant bow in his lover's direction. I suggest you all practice this. The more graceful, the better. If you require adjustments to your bow, I'm more than happy to give finer tips. Though I have serious doubts any of you will have much trouble bending at the waist, the bandits all wore their own variations of a fake sock to this call-out. Naturally, standard formal introductions aren't required. Some anonymity is expected. The most common way you'll greet someone and begin a conversation at a masquerade ball is by saying, "Do I know you?" A brief moment of silence followed. Cedric knew exactly what each of the others was thinking of saying next. How the fuck are you supposed to reply to that? It was a ridiculous greeting, he had to admit. However you like, most people tend to keep things vague or drop a couple hints about themselves. Others have fun getting into character and giving entirely made-up answers. There are no rules in this case, other than don't be a dick, I suppose, though I've definitely met plenty of dicks at these events. Whore, I'm going to flog you. Dion chuckled. Vic, behave yourself. As for food, in private events like this one, dinner is served in the dining room around midnight. However, since it looks like attendance tomorrow evening will be huge, I don't think food is going to be served at a specific time or in a specific room. Rather, we'll almost certainly be offered some refreshments throughout the evening. This part is crucial to remember. Do not, I repeat, do not carry food into the ballroom. Absolute rookie mistake. You instantly out yourselves as members of the lower classes. Make sure you only eat in the dining room or in any room you can see food displayed in. Is that clear? Each of the others gave a nod. What's likely to be served food-wise? I was just about to ask that myself. That tends to vary a great deal, though. Usually we're talking cold food. Chicken, fowl, lamb, lobster, and eel are likely to be the main event. Bit of a tangent, but the lamb our household cook used to prepare for big events was the most delicious thing 8-year-old me had ever tasted. Can confirm, I stole a piece of it every single time. Cedric spared a glance towards Selwyn, notebook open and jotting everything down. From the angle he was standing, he was pretty sure the cat had written an underlined, "Go for the lamb." Anyhow, later in the evening, you might be offered some tarts or ices as dessert. As for drink, we're talking claret, Port Lisbon. Fucking hell, we're in for a treat. Dion shot the tiger a slightly concerned, if not outright judgmental look. I know it's all very tempting, but no getting pissed on the job, lads. Hollis crossed his arms. Of course not. I trust each of us knows how to be a responsible fellow. But if any of you find where they're keeping the liquor, steal a bottle or troll for me. Oh, question. Will we all be wearing gloves? What the hell? Ridley sneered, having picked up on what was being hinted. Certainly, yes. Never be seen without gloves in a ballroom. That's how the saying goes. So if we took them off, would everyone in the room just evaporate? I fucking wish. Lastly, dancing. I trust each of us knows how to dance. A series of prolonged vowels meaning more or less, were uttered in response. I'm not expecting anyone particularly impressive or anything particularly impressive, as long as you can keep up a a minute or a minuet or a polka, you're good to go. If anyone wants to practice some steps, I could borrow Hollis's lute and play something. That sounds delightful. I'll go fetch her for you. Once he was done turning the instrument, Cedric began to pluck its strings, playing an old tune he'd learned many years before. His technique was rusty, to say the least, but he somehow made it through, and most importantly, managed to keep a regular tempo for the others to practice their steps, two at a time. Dion and Victor went first. It only took them a minute or so before they gotten confident in their movements. His level of skillful and calculated steps were almost entrancing, seductively luring his gaze in and filling him with pride all along the way. The fox had a tendency to scoff at pastimes like this, simply because he viewed them as belonging to elite, but Cedric had always considered him a gifted dancer, and he knew that beneath the act, Victor enjoyed it as much as he did. He first taught him some steps during one of those long summer afternoons in their early adolescence. He could still vividly recall every detail. Holding his friend close, losing himself in his eyes as they moved as one in the dancing sunlight, beneath that huge willow's shade. Back then, it was just a game like any other, yet now the memory was filled with deeper meaning. What would young Cedric think if he knew what life had in store for them both? As much as he dreamed and talked about the future and the beginning his life anew, the allure of the past remained strong within his thoughts. What if he managed to change his father's mind? What if young Victor and his family had been able to keep living with them? A promise he once made of sharing his home with his best friend wouldn't just be a bunch of empty words. They could have both owed the place, lived a life of luxury and ease together. No, what a load of nonsense. He hadn't missed out on making the most important choice of his life when the opportunity had presented itself. He'd chosen to follow Victor into the unknown. That's what mattered. He'd gotten to know the man he loved and had built a strong and healthy relationship with him. He met the people he was now honored to call his friends and comrades. He chose a community over isolation. And he matured in the past 9 months, exceeding even his wildest expectations. The only reason for his sudden wave of self-doubt came from that ever-looming masquerade ball. It felt like the two separate lives he'd been living as a nobleman and as a bandit were colliding, and it wasn't pleasant. So many doubts and fears he thought he left behind were resurfacing, their roots sinking into his flesh, keeping him anchored to the ground, reminding him of all the bad choices he made. Part of him wanted to burn that whole building to the ground. But for the time being, and for his sanity's sake, he just had to keep telling himself it would all go smoothly and according to plan. That was no big deal. Hey, Sid. Cedric turned his attention to his lover, still idly playing as he was lost in his thoughts the past few minutes. Yes, my love? Can we stop dancing now? Soon the bandits had finished practicing their dancing and bows. They were told to make their way to Ridley's tent one at a time so that each of them could try on the costumes Cedric had purchased in town the day before. As for the karaoke, he made himself comfortable on some large rocks a couple feet away with a chess set he picked up from Dion's tent on his lap. Victor had been more than happy to join. This wasn't as a serious match since neither of them had played the game in absolute ages. Their attempts at remembering the rules as they went led to a series of humorous mistakes which only made things more entertaining. There was no pressure. They knew they'd have time for longer and better thought out games in the future. Richard still carried a decent amount of guilt for having lost the white knight piece he'd been gifted at the start of their journey, despite Cedric's reassurance was really not a big deal the moment he brought it up again. It wasn't even mine to begin with. I nicked it from Lysander's place. Not only made it more special, it symbolized you giving him the middle finger he deserved. I must have lost it during that first robbery of ours. That's the only explanation I could think of. I knows I couldn't find it when spending our first night in the old camp. I'll think of a good replacement for it, I promise. There's no need to, my love. But I'd like to all the same. You told me you'd love to have something of mine to hold on to. I haven't forgotten that. Cedric! Hollis had emerged from Ridley's tent, followed by the bear. Stop fucking, Vic, and get over here. You're up next. Upon entering, Cedric could already see his costume lying on the bed, a richly decorated shirt, a pair of hose, boots, and gloves, a fancy-looking feathered hat, and most important of all, a mask with canine features, all of them a vibrant shade of green. Each of these was almost completely monochrome, had it not been for some subtle pink and gold patterns and designs, which gave the whole costume an air of great elegance. Can I offer you something? I have some tobacco to chew on, if you like. I'm fine, thanks. Maybe after dinner. The bear sank into his chair across his legs. Bet it feels strange getting ready for a ball after all this time. Cedric grinned as he began to unbutton his waistcoat, not without a hint of melancholy. Yes, I suppose it does. I was never as nervous about attending one as I am now, that's for sure. He bent forward to pick up the mask with his left hand. We'll be coyotes tomorrow evening, in your honor. So we're all going to be wearing these? Aye, just different colors for each of us. I thought using our regular mask would be a little too risky in this case. But I don't want us to look too similar either. If we all wore the same outfit and one of us got caught, we'd be done for in no time. Wearing the same mask is a good middle ground. I say we'd be able to spot each other easily, whilst other guests or guards would have a much harder time. Having donned the new vest, hose, and boots, Cedric wrapped the shirt around his torso. Does everything fit? Perfectly. Well, actually, I think the sleeves might be just a tad too long. Let me have a look. Ridley picked up a pencil and his paper tape, resting it on the side of the coyote's arm. I already got lucky running into a gang of bandits named the Masquerade, didn't I? Whatever do you mean? You could have been just any old rogues, but you lads went the extra mile. The sun bear gave a little amused snort as he made a mark on the tape indicating how much fabric he would have to cut. There's just nothing fun about dressing up, don't you think? Putting on a performance, as Dion always says. It's something I've always enjoyed. I remember my first time at a masked ball, back when I worked at old Wesley's as his assistant tailor. I was always on the lookout for whatever fabrics which I used to make my own outfits and costumes. The result was nothing too elaborate, but fucking hell, I felt like I could conquer the world once I saw it all come together. There we go. Come back to me later and I'll have made all the adjustments. Now please have a look at yourself. The coyote picked up the mask and hat after sliding on his gloves and stepped closer to the mirror. Ridley kept his eyes on him, waiting for a comment on the end result. Bloody hell, I don't think I've ever worn something as good looking as this at a party. It makes me want to change the way I walk and move around to match its elegance. Nonsense, you match it already. Picturing walking around grand hallways filled with beautifully dressed guests brought Cedric's mind back to Ridley's tale from just a few minutes earlier. How did that ball of yours end up going? The bear smiled, though not without a hint of sadness. I met my first crush there, so as well as it could, I'd say. One of these days I'll tell you all about her. Seeming to suddenly snap out of his thoughts, he gestured at Cedric to turn around. Let me get a full view of you, boy. The coyote did as he was told, adding a touch of flamboyance by spinning around quickly, causing the tassels on his sleeves to flap in the air behind him. Ridley simply nodded, satisfied with his work. I look amazing, stunning work as always, Red. Naturally. When have I ever disappointed you? Oh, I forgot. V said I'm not supposed to compliment you too much. Rumor has it your ego's big enough that your ticks are bursting with confidence before they are with blood. You absolute bitch. Get that boyfriend of yours in here so I can give him a proper slap. From the moment Cedric set foot outside Whitley's tent, the day seemed to have been severely slowed down to the point it was almost a relief when dinner time rolled around. Selwyn had volunteered to serve as the evening's cook and had prepared a light and very tasty barley soup. After generous portions of meat and vegetables Cedric and Hollis had served the group for lunch, this was just what they needed. Once the house cat was done cleaning the dishes, Cedric noticed him wandering back to his tent and decided to follow. It had been more than a couple of days since the two had shared a long chat together. Hey, Sal, mind if I join you for a while? Selwyn jumped at the sound of the unexpected voice. Oh, Cedric, it's you. After spending so much time together, the coyote knew how easily startled the cat would be. To prevent this, he tried coughing as he neared the tent to make his presence known, but this had been to no avail. It was such a common occurrence that he didn't even feel the need to apologize for having scared him as he previously would have. You know, you remind me of old Emma, one of the serving maids working at my parents' estate. Someone replied with a grin. I know, I'm an old woman in spirit. No need to rub it in. No, it's because V and I used to startle her so, even when it wasn't our intention. Once we rushed in to tell her my father had just acquired a painting of the Grand Canal, she always used to tell us about how much she would have loved to visit Venice. You see, my goodness, she almost hit the ceiling with how high she leaped in fright. I feel like I get along nicely with her. Yes, you most certainly would have. Have you any plans for the evening, by the way? I'm not really in the mood for tying you up, if that's what you mean. I just want to chat. Oh, well, in that case, please make yourself comfortable and be prepared for a series of lengthy tangents. Seven pushed his desk's chairs in Cedric's direction and sat himself down on the bed. Have you sketched anything new lately? No, not really. I've actually been juggling some writing ideas. Goodness knows how they'll turn out. You mean proper writing? Hi, Dion lent me this book, you see? Cedric struggled, crossing his legs and leaning in to listen. That's a fairly common occurrence. Not if you're Blake or Hollis, is it not? That's just because they can't read. Anyways, it was about the forbidden love between a nobleman and a humble servant working at her estate. Sounds a bit like you and Victor when I put it that way. Was it any good? Not really. I lost interest very quickly, but it got me thinking about what I could change to make the story work, and that morphed into a series of other ideas. It's fun getting lost in an imaginary world, though, creating characters, environments, mythical creatures. I'm not going to end up writing anything, most likely. There's a reason drawing is my main skill. I'm just not very good at much else. You need to stop putting yourself down before you even try something. Who knows, with a little practice you could become really good at it. Someone's face grew hot at the coyote's compliment. You put a lot of faith in me. Was the story's ending happy or tragic? In the original book, I mean. I didn't get that far, but I'm assuming the latter, since it was a recommendation from Dion. Cedric gave a slightly disappointed snort. It helps get the point across, I suppose. That's probably the reason he didn't tell you about it. He might have thought it would hit too close to home with the love between social classes theme. Hey, I'm not that sensitive. It's just, right now, I would prefer a deep and interesting novel that also gives me a little hope in the future. The two things aren't mutually exclusive. I understand. The house cat was smiling as he flipped through his sketchbook. Your playing earlier was really good, by the way. If you thought that was good, you should have heard me a few years ago when I still knew what I was doing. Were you taught as a child? No, my father wanted me to take up manly activities like hunting or fencing. I was lucky he never made a fuss about all the hours I spent drawing, but I think music would have been a step too far. Once I was an adult, I put my free time to good use and took up the lute in 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 harpsichord in the fourth piano. Keyboards in general, it was challenging, but I had a great teacher and was told I had a good sense of musicality, so time flew during each lesson. What about you? Can you play any instrument? No, sadly not. What sort of music do you like then? I'm not sure. Anything really. Cedric replied with a smirk. Oh, really? I know what people really mean when they say they listen to anything or everything. Seven kept up the banter, placing a hand on each hip. All right, try me. Jigs. A lot of fun. Moore's tunes. I like them musically, though I feel you need to be drunk to understand Moore's dancing. Fair enough. Ballads can be a little depressing, but that's always down to the words. Country dance tunes. Love 'em. A short silence followed. As soon as it seemed like Cedric was about to give up, the questions resumed at an even faster pace, but was useless. String quartets, keyboard music, church music, orchestral music, each of these was met with that same polite little nod. Fucking hell, you were... Cedric caught himself before completing the sentence. This had to be it. Oh, I have it. You know those soloists that play complex music for the sake of virtuosity. Virtuosity is all the rage. Is all the rage lately. Audiences go absolutely wild for them. It was obvious the coyote had finally found Seven's weak spot. The cat squirmed, trying his best to remain objective. There's still some good in at least. Fine, you got me. I cannot stand those concerts. 2 hours of noise, a poor instrument getting tortured to satisfy the public's perverted need for something that looks impressive. Selwyn was beginning to gesticulate more and more with each word he spoke, his voice getting louder and his tone getting angrier, albeit in a humorous manner. Said frustration was completely genuine, which only made his rant funnier. Then they'll whip up then they'll whip out an old tune everyone loves, like Over the Hills and Far Away, and proceed to fucking obliterate it over the course of the following 15 minutes. Cedric was laughing so hard he had almost collapsed onto the ground. The cunts just keep going too. Pardon my French. Whenever you think they finish the tune off, they bring it back to life only to murder again. I can't breathe. And everyone just eats it up. They're not listening to music. They're attending a freak show. The coyote slammed his fist on the desk, finally managing to catch his breath again. Oh, I haven't laughed like this in a long, long time. Someone shook his head. I'm going to fucking murder you, Cedric. The white fabric at the tent's entrance was flung open as Victor suddenly burst in, having heard the commotion. What the hell is going on here? His gaze settled on Cedric, who was still recovering from the laughing fit. Now it was Victor's turn to burst into laughter. What did you do to them, Sal? This must have been good. I've never seen Sad in such a state. What do you mean, what did you do? This fiend pulled it out of me. He had to go digging until he found the only type of music I cannot stand and would like to see eradicated from this earth. The coyote was still wiping the tears from his eyes. It was just so genuine. Selwyn's rants are phenomenal, to be fair. But alas, I came here to drag a certain boyfriend of mine to bed. Oh, quite right. We all best try to get as much sleep as we can before tomorrow. I won't keep him any longer. Off we go, said. The old chair creaked as Cedric slowly stood up again. Thank you, Sal. This was so much fun. Your friendship means the world to me. He pointed his right index at the house cat, blowing him a kiss with his other hand. Never ever change. I don't plan to. Good night. The fact he was hardly able to get any sleep came as no surprise to Cedric. He spent the night tossing and turning in his and Victor's bed. Hopefully he hadn't woken the fox up at any point. As soon as he caught a glimpse of sunlight, he sprung up from the mattress, rinsed his face, and threw some clothes on, ready to take a morning walk to calm his nerves. The abandoned camp in the forest surrounding it were silent. Instead of finding it peaceful as he would have any other morning, it felt unnerving. His heartbeat began to increase. The imaginary scenario of a group of guards happening across their tents whilst they were asleep formed in his mind and became impossible to ignore. He forcefully shook his head, almost like he was trying to fling that thought out of his brain and onto the frozen ground. Morning, kid. The sudden sound of Blake's voice behind him caused Cedric to almost jump out of his skin, much like Selwyn had the evening prior. There was no point in attempting to play it cool. Bloody hell, Blake. Where the fuck did you come from? The Doberman retaliated with a familiar sneer. I'm going for a walk. You joining? Cedric shrugged and followed him without another word. Though, to his dismay, he quickly discovered Blake's fast pace wasn't easy to keep up with. Despite being almost out of breath, the coyote spoke up. He needed to chat with someone to get his feelings off his chest. I wish I was you right now. How can you not be nervous about this evening? I'm fucking terrified. We all are. But that's the fun of it, no? It's no riskier than any other job. It's part of the act Dion's always talking about. Sometimes you're not just lying to your victims, you're lying to yourself for your own sanity. Cedric nodded. It's hard forcing myself to think that way. You learn to after a while. I thought you always had. I thought so too. It's just this event feels different. You're wasting your time worrying, kid. I think you're one of the more skilled bandits I've met. Such a statement coming from the doorman meant a lot, and it filled Cedric with some of the warmth he'd been missing since he'd gotten out of the bed. There was no need to thank his companion. He knew that for Blake the silence would suffice. Still, he could tell Blake was holding back a retort as to not ruin the moment of generosity. About 20 minutes later, they caught a glimpse of the road, the hills further ahead of them, and knew it was time to turn around. But before they could make their way back to the camp, Blake slowed his pace and came to a halt in a small clearing. I'm going to exercise a bit. Feel free to head back by yourself if you like. Actually, mind if I join? It will do me some good. Following Blake's morning routine was a real challenge, but Cedric was determined to go through it. He joined in on every sit-up, push-up, each leg and chest workout, and even picked up a couple of moderately heavy walks Blake had found close by months ago and had set aside to use for arm and shoulder exercises. By the end of the last set, he could feel he'd pushed himself just to the right amount, and most importantly, he finally cleared his mind and felt ready to start the day. Blake gave him a pat on the back. They started walking back to the camp at a notably slower pace, which Cedric did not mind one bit. What are your plans for the future, if you have any? Damn if I know. Would be nice knowing what it's like to actually live somewhere instead of always being on the move. Would be nice knowing what it's like to actually live somewhere instead of always being on the move. My old man would have wanted it for me. Could you see yourself living with Whitley one day? The bandit snorted. That lad deserves better than me, and I'm sure he has better plans for the future than I do. A short pause followed. I suppose my answer is yes. I wouldn't mind sharing my life with him. Cedric smiled. I hope things work out for all of us. We'll see. Despite the conversation screeching to a halt, Cedric let the silence linger since he knew Blake wasn't one for being too wordy. He'd spoken his mind already. We'd already reached the camp again when the coyote thought of one more subject he was curious to discuss with the doorman. Before I crossed paths with Victor again, I never stopped to consider whether I might be attracted to men. But then everything suddenly clicked. But then everything suddenly made sense. I was wondering, did you have a moment of realization when everything clicked? Firstly, I'm not a certified poofter like you. Excuse me, where we got up to a few evenings ago begs to differ. I just mean, when I find someone attractive, I don't really stop to consider their gender. It just happens. That's very interesting. I've always thought of it as my own business, never really bothered to stop and consider what I was or whether it was considered appropriate or not. That made sense for someone who'd been born into banditry. Cedric wondered if he might have felt the same way had he led a similar life. Upon reaching the camp again, both bandits were greeted by a still drowsy Victor, sizzling half a dozen sausages in one of Hollis's pans. It was still quite early in the morning compared to their usual breakfast time. Clearly, Victor hadn't managed to get much sleep either. Anyone else would have found it impossible to spot a hint of restlessness in him, but by now, Cedric had learned to recognize the fox's more subtle mannerisms. The sausages smelled and tasted heavenly. He had to refrain from gobbling up his share in seconds. Someone's hungry today. The coyote replied with more than a hint of pride. Jordan on one of Blake's workouts. No wonder then, are you still alive? I'll be easy on the kid, but if he keeps it up, we can make things progressively more difficult. I wouldn't want it to be in your shoes, love. I went easy on the kid, but if he keeps it up, we can make things progressively more difficult. I wouldn't want it to be in your shoes, love. That's 'cause you're a lazy bastard, Vic. Bonjour, mes amis. A slightly grouchy Dion had appeared from his tent and was greeted by the others as he trudged over to join them by a campfire. Hope you all slept well, and let's get this over with and done. He raised his voice, calling out for the rest of the group. Boys, I need each and every one of us here this instant. We're going over this evening's plan. A muffled reply carried over from one of the tents, followed by a complete silence. I said, move your fucking asses this instant, or I will make you regret it. All right, I'm just washing my face, for heaven's sake. Don't you forget what happened on May Day last year. I needn't say more. Sandra had no clue what the hyena was referring to, but it seemed to do the trick. Each of the others had appeared from their tents in less than a minute. Dion placed a piece of parchment he'd been carrying down in front of him, fixing it to a large tree stump with a knife. The rest of the bandits who had regrouped around him quickly turned silent. The faint sunlight illuminated a meticulously drawn map of the Hillsford Manor house. This was the original building plan from when it had first been designed, which Hollis and Blake had managed to steal from the town archives a few weeks ago. I want you all to become very well acquainted with this building's layout. We'll be heading there after 7 o'clock, traveling with Hollis's carriage, which is going to be sitting in the courtyard for the duration of the event. It is safe to assume we shall be heading straight to the ballroom once we've entered the mansion. That'll be the perfect crowded environment for us to carry out our work whilst going by unnoticed. Shall we be splitting up into different groups? Naturally, I don't want us all turning up at the same time either. Each group will arrive within 10 minutes from the others at the very least. What a shame. We would have looked stunning side by side in our outfits. Whilst I appreciate the theatricality of your vision, Willie, we must sadly favor being practical in these instances. Now, the group formations are as follows. Blake and Willie shall be the first, Cedric and Victor the second, whilst me, Hollis, and Seven shall be arriving last, since we'll have the carrots with us. As for the names, after months' internal debate, I'll settle on Sebastian Alamaya Lancaster IV. Nothing too elaborate. The whole group burst out laughing at Dion's deadpan delivery of the name. What's funny? It's perfect. What's worse is it's accurate. Dion nodded elegantly in response. Your approval is what I'm after, my lad. Seven, I'm thinking you could pose as a cousin of mine, another Lancaster. I represent names, so you're free to come up with anything you like. I'll have a think then. Hollis, what about you? Keep in mind, you'll be our humble serving man for the evening. The tiger shook his head dismissively, though he was still clearly mulling things over, before giving a definitive answer. Call me anything. Jeeves will do. Not fucking Jeeves. Blake, you're next. But how am I meant to compete with Jeeves? Doberman sighed before puffing up his chest, put on his best snooty accent. Call me Richard. Richard Highcourt. Of course, you name yourself Dick. Bet you can't beat that bear. Ridley smiled smugly. Hugh Janus, at your service. Oh, heaven's sake, said my lad. Please help me bring a pensive decorum back into this conversation. The coyote covered his mouth with his right hand, trying to think of a reasonably posh name. Rufus Walsingham. Splendid. You never disappoint, lad. And last but not least, Victor. Heather Birthwhistle. Brilliant. Now please make sure you remember your own neighbor, as well as everyone else's. You never know when it might come in handy. As for what we'll be doing, Hollis, you'll be loitering about near the entrance, keeping an eye on our carriage. Would it hurt if I also picked a pocket? Hector Birtwhistle. Brilliant. Now please make sure you remember your own name, as well as everyone else's. You never know when it might come in handy. As for what we'll be doing. Hollis, you'll be loitering about near the entrance, keeping an eye on our carriage. Would it hurt if I also picked a pocket or two while I'm there? Guard duty can be tedious. I could steal from some of the other carriages too, if I get the chance. As long as you're discreet about it, you could murder someone for our care. I'll try my best not to. Blake, really, listen closely. All the way upstairs, hidden amongst the lavish private chambers, is a room stacked with the owner's most prized possessions. I want you two to head up there and do some investigating. Depending on what you find, you might be able to make multiple trips back and forth to load up the cart. How do we know that specific room is where you think it is? Dion pointed at the plan in front of them. Says it right here, nicely spelled out. Dion, you know I can't wait for fuck's sake. Behind it grumbled, though an amused smile was clearly visible on his face. Treasury, that's what's written. But for all we know, its contents might have been moved somewhere else. Those plans aren't exactly up to date. Very true. What if a servant working at a certain manor house we tipped off confirmed this is to still be accurate? Would that satisfy you? Really tilted his head to one side, looking a little confused at such a specific example. Yes, it certainly would. I hope my pockets are spacious enough. What if they rip open? I could get us all caught. Whitley smiled. No matter how long they know him, Selwyn had always been the same overthinker. All of our costumes have very large pockets. I made sure to place them so that they are both easy to slip things into, but also don't create obvious bulges as to give away the trinkets and valuables being stored within. No need to worry. No need to worry. Have you forgotten who you were talking to with? I don't mean to sound alarmist, but the group burst out laughing. Please don't finish that sentence, Selwyn. As for our lovebirds, I want you both wandering the ballroom, having a jolly good time, and pickpocketing as you go. A dumb grin appeared on Victor's face. I've seen Cedric pull off the impossible whilst on the job. Is that right, my darling? Hollis and Selwyn taught me well, is all. Waving it off was useless. The fox was determined to compliment his partner whether he liked it or not. Didn't you once accompany a gentleman you just stolen from around town? You were on a hunt for his pickpocketer, if I recall correctly. Now that's a fucking power move. I almost said myself, but that's besides the point. What about you, John? What shall you be doing? I will also be downstairs, keeping an eye out for anything suspicious, and that is a bit of a distraction. I'll make sure each of you can find me, should you need me for whatever reason. I just hope you're not planning on attempting another comedic routine. We all remember how the last one went. The hyena let out a cavernous sigh. Alas, my amusing reference to the frogs of Aristophanes fell on deaf ears. I still have thought some Falstaffian quips would have been appreciated at the very least. I doubt you even know any jokes that belong in our current century. The hyena crossed his arms. Sometimes I wonder why I even try with you lot. We love you, John. Ah yes, this is sex, that's what it is. The others burst out laughing at the unexpected remark. Now, does anyone have any questions? Blake stepped forward, placed his right hand on the map. I would have read and I take too long to find the room we're looking for. Are there any other clues that could help us out? Alas, not that I know of. Perhaps our Cedric could help us with this particular dilemma. The coyote smiled as Dion extended the palm of his right hand in his direction. The thought of being considered an expert at manor houses definitely amused him. First things first, I've told you I have never visited this particular estate, so take what I say with more than a pinch of salt. That being said, imagine I was a wealthy lord and owned precious crystals, pearls, rubies, paintings worth a fortune, and the like. I want to sell them off whenever I got a chance to do so. So we're not looking for a secret doorway hidden amongst tall bookshelves, nor should we expect an elaborate locking system. It will most likely be a door like any other. Looks like it faces one of the main corridors too. They're going to have some servants guarding this room, aren't they? Aye. They'll definitely have a couple of armed men patrolling the corridors. Nothing we can't sneak past. I can also help with distracting the guards. Could pretend I'm looking for someone I know or something like that. Ridley gave Severin a pat on the back. Talk their heads off, Sel. Do what you do best. Though speaking of hidden doorways and secret corridors, it might not be the case for the treasury, but manors such as this one have many such passages which are regularly used by the servants. It's a way for them to take more shortcuts and for nobles to see the troubling sight of a lower class person less often. In short, it's a win-win situation for both parties. Quite right, Cedric. Hidden passes could very well save our lives in a dire situation. Be on the lookout for them at all times. A brief silence followed. Dion's gaze settled on each of them until he spoke again. There's one last point I have to make. That we'll all be as well prepared as possible. We cannot stand a chance against fate itself. You're all well aware of how plans such as these tend to play out. Something or other will go wrong. There's no preventing it. What we can do, however, is use these tricks of fate as an opportunity to put our improvisational skills to the test. Placing a hand on each hip, he lifted his head and gave a proud nod. That being said, it appears we're all set. May fortune smile on us, my friends. I'm sure we'll pull this off splendidly. You may get back to whatever you were doing now. Before Cedric was able to follow Victor back to their tent, the hyena caught up with him and placed a large hand on his shoulder, gently but firmly anchoring him in place. Cedric, my lad, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm all right, I suppose. Dion didn't buy it even for an instant. What's wrong? Alright, fine, I've been anxious since I woke up. I wish there was some way I could stop my mind from wandering like this. I wish there was just an easy answer to not assuming the worst would happen without knowing which worst it could be. Cedric had always looked up to the bandit leader, and even now was secretly hoping Dion might have something to suggest, or that he'd find just the right words to say. This solution is called gin, and it's strictly off limits until we're done with the job. But you and I could perhaps share a little secret. The hyena will adjust his belt so that Cedric could clearly see a tiny flask that had been tied to it. He loosened the rope around it and uncorked it, taking a sip and then offered it to his companion. Getting too anxious can lead to committing mistakes we usually find laughable on any other occasion. If this is our only solution, then we must bend the rules a little. Cedric down someone to drink, and felt its warmth slowly spread within. Thank you, Dion. I really appreciate it. Things will feel just a tad more melancholy without you or Victor around. I know you both have your plans for the future, and I have supported you both since the very first evening we were introduced. But I would be lying if I didn't say I could picture a future masquerade with you in our ranks. The coyote was caught off guard by Dion's sudden change of topic would have been an understatement. He tried to think of a good response but came up short. There just wasn't enough time for him to consider what the right thing to say was. You still remember hearing about our plans? This reply probably came off as overly defensive, though it wasn't meant with any comment. I just didn't expect it. That talk was months ago. Of course I remember. I was impressed at the thought of both of you wanting to start a new life. And after this heist, you'll most likely have the means to follow through with your plans. Nevertheless, I'd like you to consider the following offer. If you were to stay, I'd let you keep any money you make from any robberies you carry out with Victor or by yourself. Even if you were to rejoin us in a year or so. Gosh, am I really that good? Everyone has the aptitude for this job. You've proven to possess. This statement was met with a shrug. It's only impressive if you consider my background and how it still defines me. That's some high-class horse shit, Cedric. The only person here bringing up your past is you. And Blake, but that tail-raiser jokes about everyone that way. I never made anyone that offer. I just made you. Think about it. Cedric nodded. Dion was right, as usual. Part of him didn't like the idea of leaving the bandits he'd come to call friends behind. But this wasn't going to be a goodbye. Still, he and Victor would manage to arrange a couple trips to go pay a visit to others in the future. No matter how tempting Dion's offer was, he still wanted to follow his initial plan. I will, I promise. Hours later, when each the bandits had finished their preparations, they regrouped around the campfire. This was it. The wait was over. Excitement was coupled with palpable tension in the cold evening air. The flickering flames illuminated each of them, dressed in their new costumes and carrying their masks. They certainly had no trouble passing as a traveling theater company whilst looking like this, Cedric thought to himself. Dion raised his arm, demanding their attention, and gave a few last words of encouragement. By now there was not much left to remind the group of. They were all well aware of what was expected of them and had firmly etched that old building plan into their minds. Hollis put out the fire, and he and Whitley held up a pair of lanterns as they all began their march. For a moment, the surroundings ceased to feel real. The scene looked like it was straight out of a Dutch painting one could observe hanging in the corridors of Cedric's old home. No doubt the effect really had intended. The bear himself was wearing a cream-colored outfit, almost shining in the dim light. Blake looked like he stepped out of Shakespearean play, completely covered in red fabric with a shiny laurel adorned helmet on his head and a sword cape flapping behind him. Hollis was sporting a tall, feather-adorned top hat. His outfit's main color was blue, with some gold touches that gave it an almost moth-like design. He was carrying a simpler mask than the others, more apt for the humble servant role he'd taken on. Dion's black garments, despite Cedric's predictions, seemed oddly somber. The only elements that stood out from this almost Puritan aesthetic were a red and purple sash wrapped around his right shoulder and a bright red mask he was carrying. As for Selwyn, Ridley had meant for him to wear a costume similar to Dion's, but the house cat had ended up completely tearing through it only an hour earlier. After half an hour of general panic, he'd been handed what the Sun Bear had claimed was the only reserve outfit, a bold and voluminous ball gown with a towering white wig. Much to everyone's amusement, it had turned out to be the perfect fit, though, of course, walking across a forest in it wasn't the easiest task. The others had joked that he could claim to be the disheveled ghost of Dion's character wife upon arrival at the ball, and despite some grumbling, Selwyn had taken to the idea. Lastly, Victor was dressed in a white costume reminiscent of his usual outfit, yet with an added touch of vernice, apt for the occasion. A large tricorn hat and little splashes of pink and black completed the look. Everything was beginning to feel magical. The withered leaves carried by the wind, the bony fingers belonging to the branches swaying above them, the faint light illuminating their faces, the sign of the weapons each of them was tucking in beneath their theatrical costumes. It felt like they'd all been conjured up by an artist's imagination. Cedric was almost afraid to blink in case this mysterious world around him were to suddenly vanish. Shit. Almost tripping up on a rock in front of him was enough to drag him back to reality. Victor gently took hold of his hand. Don't you die on us now, love. They were bound to reach the main path that ran through the forest any moment now. Selwyn was walking to their right, whilst Hollis was sitting at the front of his old red carriage, holding the reins and checking on the horses. Always wear gloves. No eating in the ballroom or upstairs. God, I hope I don't forget anything at the last minute. Cedric chuckled. You'll be fine, Sal. Nobles break those rules all the time. Make sure you don't do anything too noticeable. You'll be golden. In this outfit, just exert some of that ladylike charm. Or pray someone else makes more of an ass of themselves than you do. Exactly. Asses or not, we'll be considerably richer tomorrow, and that's what matters. You have any plans for what you'd like to do with the money? You're asking the wrong person if you want an exciting answer. I can already think of a billion practical things we might need. Oh, come on. What's the point of doing all this if we can't have some fun afterwards? We should organize a trip somewhere special. Could take a carriage up north to see a lake district for a few days. I've always wanted to. That's a lovely idea, Sal. Hollis grumbled. Don't know how doable it is. That depends on how much money we make. If it's more than enough, we should put it to the vote. Come on, Hollis, why not? I didn't say no, did I? I just don't want to see our savings vanish in a matter of days. The conversation was cut short the moment they reached the path. Each bandit covered their face with their mask and fixed it in place under their hats. They were no longer their usual selves. From this moment on, they were nameless, ghostly figures, shrouded in mystery. Dion cleared his throat. According to the plan, now's the time to split up and head into town. Blake, Whitley, you go first. Sandra and Victor will follow in 10 minutes or so, whilst Hollis, Selwood, and I will stick together and get there last. We'll all meet up at the camp again later. Remember to whistle our signal just before you get back so we know who's approaching. Yes, sir. Blake took off his helmet and performed a bow in his dark red outfit. See you later, you bunch of tail raisers. Dion rolled his eyes, whilst both Cedric and Victor automatically responded with an up yours. Selwyn, you ought to bind and gag that dog more often. It will certainly be to everyone's benefit. The Doberman spoke again, probably replying with another insult, but he was already too far off for the others to make out any of his words. In less than a minute, Whitley and Blake's silhouettes had been swallowed by the forest's long evening shadows. Perhaps tying him upside down from a tree would do the trick. That sounds ideal. Hogwash, who do you think you're lying to? You love Blake and Whitley just as much as any of us. All the more reason for me to expect better behavior. They're just lucky they happen to be extremely skilled at what they do. A few achingly long minutes later, Victor gently took hold of his lover's gloved hand. All right, my dear, where next? Are you ready? Cedric nodded without uttering a word, worried it might somehow betray his restlessness. Dion replied with a wink from beneath his mask. Break a leg, boys. Go do what you do best. The moment the others had faded into the distance, Cedric noticed how silent and void of life the forest surrounded him, and Victor had grown. He really missed those long summer days when cheerful birdsong would be echoing all around him. He spent most of the walk looking down at the path directly ahead of him to avoid stepping in mud if he could help it. The joys of being overdressed for a social event, he thought to himself. Supposing everything goes well, you'd be able to pay off your debt with Dion. I certainly would. It will feel like a great burden finally off my back. And what would happen after that? Cedric was half expecting some new, unexpected issue he'd never given it any consideration to be brought up in response, but this was not the case. Cedric replied in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. You and I would pack our belongings, say our goodbyes, and begin the next leg of our journey. I'm not going to lie, I'm very excited. Aren't you, pretty boy? The fox's smile was clearly audible from beneath his mask. He meant every word. There's no other reason Dion might want to keep you around. Dion's a man of honor. There are no hidden clauses in his contracts. Free to go means free to go. Why do you ask? He told you something? He made me a good offer in case I wanted to remain a member of the masquerade, or even rejoin in a year or so. Victor clearly wasn't expecting this. And what did you say? That I considered it. Despite trying to conceal his anxiety, his hands were visiting nervously. Look, Cedric, I have nothing against you if you chose to stay. The Coyote shook his head. I don't want to stay. I want to follow you. I want us to build a life together. Victor replied with a quiet nod. I love that more than anything in the world. His words were tender and almost naked in their honesty. There was no doubt in their minds. Their thoughts hadn't changed since that evening they spent on the rooftops near Victor's old hideout. The closer they got to Castle Hillsford, the more distant sounds began to grow audible. sounds of the crowded streets and of carriages and people hurriedly coming and going from the town's gate. That manor house really chose to be on the other side of town just to spite us, didn't it? All the better for us to take a pleasant stroll through the center and observe the passers-by, my dear. I've never been the one of those. I've never been to one of those events. It'll be fun to do some people watching and see how everyone has dressed up for the occasion. I've been to so many of these, and yet to think this is the first masquerade ball we'll be attending together is quite amusing. A tiny white object caught Cedric's eye as it glided towards the cold ground. It's snowing. It's actually snowing. The fox's head started up as he glanced at their surroundings. Soon enough, countless other snowflakes were suspended in mid-air, floating downwards. My goodness, you're right. How absolutely enchanting. Victor sneered, replying with a playful jab. Oh ho, listen to you. Just like that, you reverted from woe to aristocrat in a matter of seconds. We need to get into character, you ruffian. Go on, try it. After a brief silence, Victor replied, putting on his best upper-class accent. I positively adore the snowy weather, old chap. Cedric burst out laughing. You'll be invited out to tea in no time, mark my words. The old trees surrounding them grew more scarce and were replaced by rolling fields as the town gate came into view. Half a mile ahead of them, a solitary guard was standing at the entrance and seemed to be minding his own business. His presence was enough to put the coyote slightly on edge at first, though there really wasn't much to be done on an evening like this, other than making sure fights didn't break out on the street once folks had had enough or had too much to drink. There was no risk of them getting stopped. Just as expected, the two lovers walked straight past the guard, who let out a deafening yawn without even attempting to cover his mouth. The town center was as grand as ever, the rows of lit windows lending it a warmth it seemed to lack during the day. In the middle of the busy main square, a band of musicians had picked up their instruments and had begun playing a set of jigs while a small crowd of dancers and spectators gathered around them. It wasn't just the wealthy who were enjoying a good time that evening, judged by how full all the local taverns were. To nobody's surprise, a number of masked figures could be seen mingling amongst the crowd, most of them probably headed for the old manor house, just like Cedric and Victor. The fox was really getting into it excitedly, pointing out the costumes that caught his eye. There was no lack of creativity to be found with the designs. Cedric spotted a Robin Hood with a quiver and bow hung on his back, a russet green man covered in leaves and moss from head to toe, and a couple of Commedia dell'arte characters just a few feet behind him. A group of badgers close by were dressed as Turks, the men sporting huge turbans, whilst the women were covered with thin veils. Despite their efforts, it was abundantly clear none of them had set a single foot on Turkish soil in their lives. Some of these are absolutely ridiculous. That's a fun bit. Behind them, an unmasked fox gentleman was strolling at a leisurely pace with a walking stick in hand. He struck the coyote as quite handsome. In fact, he almost looked like Victor. Maybe just have a thing for foxes, Cedric. He most certainly had a thing for foxes. Upon closer inspection, however, their vulpine appearance turned out to be the actual disguise. Their real species and even their gender had been cleverly concealed. Possibly the most impressive costume they'd seen so far. The less adventurous or those with less money to spend on elaborate outfits could be seen wearing a simple black domino over their heads and shoulders paired with plain white masks. Nothing special, but it did the trick. The coyote had worn something similar on a couple occasions been when he hadn't been given enough time to prepare for a ball. Next, Cedric's gaze settled on a shadowy, mysterious-looking figure. They were wearing an elaborate costume with a long, bird-like mask that reminded him of the one Victor would always use. The coyote pointed them out to his partner. That's one you if that's one you if you had no budget limit for your regular bandit attire. Cedric smiled. What can I say? They have good taste. A silk purse tied to one of the figure's leather belts caught the coyote's eye. And good money by the look of it. With a gust of wind, the snow grew heavier. Luckily for both the bandits and the other attendees, the manor house had just come into view, which meant their clothes wouldn't be too damp by the time they reached the entrance. They walked past a series of great urns flanking either side of the path. It felt like they were teetering on the threshold of dangerous unexplored land. Surroundings that would have once been part of Cedric's everyday life now glared at him meticulously. He became an intruder of lower status than any of the servants employed by the estate's owners. Both bandits got their first proper look at the building they heard so much about over the past few months. Though they knew exactly what to expect from the plans Dion had sold them, it was still a tad disappointing about so much build-up, or after so much build-up. At first glance, it actually reminded him of his old home, albeit at least 5 times its size. The closer they got, the more details emerged with adornments, rows of large windows, tall chimneys, and subtle Baroque ornaments burst out from the red brick walls. The main entrance was the most impressive part of the whole building. The bricks of the facade had been covered by towering stone pilasters, hearkening back to the temples of ancient Greece, lending it a grandiose look. A row of statues silently observed the couple as they reached the steps leading up to the front door, which had been left wide open, with the servants standing on each side to welcome the attendees and point them in the right direction. Music and laughter could already be heard coming from the bright and crowded halls within. The guard to their right greeted them with a polite little bow. Good evening, dear guests. You'll find the ballroom to the left of the main hall, whilst the dining room is to the right. In case you want to take off any article of clothing, the tiny door next to the dining room entrance leads to the cloakroom. Cedric thanked the servant with a nod. Victor leaned towards the coyote to whisper in his ear. He was almost giddy with excitement. Are you scared, Cedric? Yes I am. The fox let out a chuckle. Let's rob these bastards blind. To be continued. An autosave has been created for you. Hello, and thank you for reading this 6th build for Project Newman's A Fall from Grace. I hope you're all looking forward to what the next chapter has in store. I promise you we won't disappoint you. This novel was written by, composed by, and illustrated by project developer Alex, with Grayson as relief coder, music programmer, and story designer. I tried my hand at coding for these last 3 builds. It's been fun figuring things out while trying to maintain the style AFFG has had so far. If anything crashes, you know who to blame. This visual novel's entire plot, started to finish, was conceived on 2 voice calls between Grayson and myself back in around March of 2022. We have had so much fun designing a story that utilizes Alex's gorgeous way of setting places and the characters, and Gray's ability to yes in a VN plot over only 2 calls. This has been a passion project I have been so excited to be a part of and continue to be excited for the continuation of. A Fall from Grace represents more than just a visual novel. It's also the story of how Alex and I became best friends ever since the first message of "Hey, I love your art" on Twitter. Then following this, the idea for A Fall from Grace came about very quickly after Grayson offered me a place on the project New Moon team. A special thanks also to Mass, the chief editor, proofreader, and storyline aide for the project. Without Mass's help, we would not be able to release this or any of the previous builds to you now. And a big thank you to our coder, Kamek, for his own hard work on the third build, as well as for salvaging mine and Grayson's coding work into a visual novel that works from start to finish. Special thanks to Marcy of Eden's Reach for helping with certain elements of coding, and to my partner J.K. Wolf for additional musical track edits, as well as massive thank you to everyone in the Project New Moon Discord server and our amazing moderators Akami, Butter, Gary, and Thunger. I hope you enjoyed the OST written by Alex. No expenses were spared when Alex suggested a soundtrack based on English folk songs, though I did sneak one track into the second build for the Soldiers March just based on a piece of music that Alex and I both adore. If you did enjoy this visual novel, be sure to follow us both on Twitter using the icons on the main menu. We also have a link to our Discord server too. Please join if you enjoy this visual novel. We would love to see you in our Discord community. Also consider following Project New Moon or Itch.io as well. We also have a link on the main menu to our Patreon if you would like early access to both A Fall from Grace's builds as well as other New Moon projects. We will post early script drafts, concept art, and character art on the Patreon too. So if you like what we're doing and want bonus content and free in early access, it's all there. Thank you all. Hope you enjoyed Project New Moons. Alright, so I might have to stop, maybe I'll just keep going, just keep continuing to read their messages at the end of every update. I'll just continue doing that, but yeah, a little long. But anyway, the other projects working on. Eden's Weeks got an update not long ago. It's a short one, but they got an update, and I'll be reading this one soon. This is the first update they did in like 2.5 years, so I'll be doing this, and I think if whenever One Last Night gets an update, I'll play it too. But I think if they do get an update, it will kind of motivate me to give it a play on my own time. But I've already read it on my own time. How the story is, but if an update comes out, I'll be motivated to read it on my own. Read it here on YouTube anyway. But it's also been 2 years since this one has had an update. Alright, so some birds out here chirping, which is annoying, so I'm gonna keep it pretty short. So I think this is going to fail. I accidentally pressed the Twitter things here. Anyway, I think this is going to fail. I just have a feeling. Lysander is supposed to be there as well, but they don't know that. So that's going to be a big obstacle in their plans. And it's the biggest heist for them so far. They're really worried about whether this plan was succeed or not. But they certainly have been preparing for it. They certainly been preparing for it for quite a bit. Going over the plans and the layout of the building and which room to go into to get the stuff and like how to deal with guards if they if you run into them and all that stuff. So that's very important for the success of this mission. But again, Life Center there, yeah, something's gonna go wrong. I mean, I may be wrong, but I believe something's gonna go wrong with this. With Life Center there, and plus how big of a mission this is. Preparing for everything. I think something's gonna go wrong, and Cedric will get caught by Lysander. He'll get caught by Lysander and possibly the others as well. And I think things is going to go downhill. But we have to see what happens. Alright, so we got to know more about the characters and why they joined the masquerade and what they like and what they don't like. And Dion gave Cedric an offer. Like, basically, he gave him an offer like, if you stay with the masquerade, then whatever, like if you go on robberies, then he gets to have all the money. Like if he goes on robbery, I guess on his own, then whatever money he makes, all of it goes to him. He doesn't have to share it with the other members. And that was a nice offer for Dion. Well, from Dion. It was a nice offer from Dion, but I think Cedric is going to go with I think Cedric's going to decline. He wants to be with Victor, and Victor. And when Cedric talked about his conversation with Dion about it, Victor's basically shot it down. Like he doesn't want to be doing this long term. Like, it looks like as soon as this mission is complete, he's gonna leave. He's gonna leave. He's gonna use the items they've captured or stolen to start a new life. And he wants Cedric to come with him, so that would have to be a no for Dion. But it was a good offer from Dion, and Dion was very impressed with Cedric being on the team because he's a elite nobleman himself, and he gave the team valuable tips on etiquette and how these mansions are laid out. Etiquette and how the mansions are laid out in life as an upper class person. So Cedric's knowledge of that was very helpful, and basically Cedric is thanking him by offering to let Cedric have all of the earnings for crimes that he goes on instead of having sharing. So that's nice that he views Cedric as being a valuable part of the team. And his bond with the other members have only gotten better, So I doubt this mission will succeed, but if they do manage to succeed this mission, or if they do get caught, well, or if this mission does not succeed and they somehow manage to get themselves out of the situation, then well, they can either, they can always go back to the masquerade if things don't end up well. But anyway, they can go back to the masquerade, and they'll still be able to make some income from the stuff they stole from the nobles, and or they can, if they're able to make it big with this plan, they can use all the stolen stuff to have a good, decent life together. You know, Fred and I mean Cedric and Victor. I almost confused a character from a different game. So anyway, it was a little short. A little short. I thought maybe this update would have been in there already, and maybe Lysander will have caught Cedric. But anyway, we're just now getting in there. So definitely in the next update, there should be something big happening. So thank you all very much for watching. Goodbye.